Hey there, friends. Dave Paulides, Canadian Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. And Tuck got new negotiation rights, and she wanted to sleep through my presentations. And that is what she's been doing in here next to the library while I've been in here. And she says, "Daddy, if you're going to wake me, you scratch my belly." Yeah, you good girl. You sleep, girl. You had a busy day chasing those big guys out there. So anyhow, thanks for being here. And you're in a missing persons segment. And this is a good one. And we're going to talk about an area that I've been to many times. In fact, I live not too far from it. Rocky Mountain National Park, Estes Park, California. How many have been there? Okay, good. Couple of things. People have been very, very, very kind to me, and they've sent me some very, very nice notes, etc. One from Malbon, New York. Last name is Godfried. Sent me one of the nicest notes and gifts that I've ever had. I'm humbled. And thank you for that. I don't take it lightly when people take the time to do something really kind. You guys are very, very nice to me. I think about it every day. Thank you. Now, the reason why I asked you to tell me if you've been unsubscribed is because I want to prove it to you how many people have been. Thousands. And it was told to me about a year ago that this was happening. And I tried to ignore it and just tried to plow on. I got rid of the news off the channel, hoping that that would cause YouTube to lay off me, but it didn't work. They're still pounding me real hard. And they're not notifying thousands of people when I have a video come up. And then others, they're unsubscribing them against their will. I think you understand it is impossible to build a program like this if they're doing this to you. Got to be logical here, folks. Got to be logical. Because I don't want to get anybody mad. I want you to come to the same conclusions I come to. I know that they don't want me here. I get it. They're doing everything they can. My intermediary between YouTube and myself, my partner, they call it a partners program, but they're not really a partner. They've sent YouTube over 6 messages in the last 2 months. They said, yeah, we'll get to it. Yeah, we'll get to it. Never a response. They don't want to do anything about it. So I'm still meandering my way around the different sites trying to understand what I'm going to do. But something's going to happen. And you will know here, unless I get totally whitewashed and my channel disappears. But then you can always find me at Rumble. I'm on there. Missing 411, the factual news with David Paulides. I'm on Rumble. And you can also find me on my website, Can-Am Missing Project. Can-Am, like Canadian American Missing Project.com. And also the website where you can get the hats, the Missing 411 books on Washington that I just released at NA, like North America, NABigfootsearch.com. Those are the ways you can get a hold of me. I appreciate your comments. And I know some of you don't think I read them, but I read every one that I can. I mean, there's very few I don't get to. So, on to the story for tonight. If you're a follower of my work, you know one of the subcategories is church leaders. And it's a strange subcategory. But in my books, I've covered several church leaders that have disappeared under highly unusual circumstances. One right near my house here at Glacier National Park, and just off the top of my head, another one in Israel. 2 of the most bizarre disappearances anyone could ever write about. Now this one involves Rocky Mountain National Park. a man named Thornton Sampson. He was 63 years old when he disappeared on September 3rd, 1915. Thornton was born to serve the Lord, and I mean that. He was born in Hampton, Sydney, Prince Edward County in Virginia. His father was Reverend Francis Sampson, and he was a professor of Hebrew at the Union Theological Seminary. Now, Thornton was brilliant for his age. A lot of people thought he was super smart. At 16 years old, he entered the University of Virginia, and 3 years later, he graduated from there at 19 years old. Not an easy thing to do. People described him as very humble. Well, after he graduated, he spent 5 years studying throughout Europe. He was so far ahead of his time. I want you to understand this. Traveling to Europe was no easy task. Multiple ship trips. A lot of people got sick on ships. Think about it. How he managed to get through life in a healthy phase and reach the ripe age of 63 is pretty unreal for somebody that traveled as much as he did. Well, after he came back from Europe in 1878, he married his wife named Ella. Ella was from Memphis, Tennessee. And the same month he got married, he got blessed. He was ordained into the ministry of the Presbyterians in Charlottesville, Virginia. Stop there for a second. So he's 24. He just got married. Same month he got married, he gets ordained. He just got back from studying in Europe. The man had already lived a life that most people at that point in the world never had imagined. And this is how important he is. There's only one picture I could find for Sampson. This is him. Distinguished guy. He was famous for that mustache. Gotta love the mustache. So, he's married that same month. 1892, the family travels through Asia as Thornton was studying religions in India, Japan, Korea, and China. And it was during this time that he and Ella had 3 daughters and a son. In 1894, he became president of Fredericksburg College of Virginia. And then 3 years later, he was asked to be president of the Austin College in Texas. I was thinking about why these colleges were looking at him. Well, first of all, he was an intellect, super smart, humble, and had that kind of background that I'm sure at the time wasn't very common. Well, in 1900, Thornton was requested to be a founding president of the Austin Theological Seminary. And he took it, and he built it. And it eventually opened October 1st, 1902. A huge accomplishment. The Reverend loved hiking and fishing. Sounds just like me. I mean, when I read about this guy, I was thinking about myself. He had climbed many of the great passes in Europe, Switzerland, Italy, France, and Spain. He had also spent 2 summers in the Rockies up above Estes Park. Now, what's important about that is Rocky Mountain National Park hadn't even been established then. Thornton had found what beauty some people never see. And I can tell you that spending time at that park, beautiful, beautiful. I spent a lot of time there with Harvey Pratt and his wife and Angie and Ben. Many of the scenes in Missing 411, our first movie, were filmed in and around the park. A lot of great memories. And the places here that I'm going to talk about, I know exactly where they're at. August 7th, 1915. Thornton and Ella had planned for many months, to travel to Denver, Colorado, and that day they arrived. The pair traveled around the city, stayed at the Metropole Hotel in Denver, which was one of the nicest. Kind of took a nice leisurely break from life. And then it was planned that on August 11th, Thornton moved Ella to the YMCA and got her a room there. And she knew, and it was planned, that he was going to be gone until September 5th, traveling to Estes and do some hiking and fishing. And he had brought along some European fishing flies that he got when he was in Europe. I read that and I thought, man, that's interesting. So he had his fishing pole. He's made his way to Estes, told his wife he'd be back on the 5th. She wasn't concerned. He had traveled to many, many greater passes than this. And in years earlier, he had spent 2 summers at this same location outside of Estes, hiking around what is now Rocky Mountain National Park. Even though Reverend Sampson was 63 years old, he was in phenomenal shape. Now, for you that haven't been there, the locations I'm about to tell you about are all above 10,000 feet. And it's no easy stroll in the park climbing up over 10, 12,000 feet peaks. I can tell you that right now. I lived there for 10 years, and it got to be easier for me because I got acclimated. But if you go from lower elevation, like where he was living in Texas, up to these high elevations, he was almost superhuman. But he loved it. On August 28th, Thornton wrote the last letter to Ella. In the letter, he stated that he felt great. Hey, it's okay, Huck. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Don't worry. Huck sometimes gets nervous when I tell these stories. Go back to sleep, dear. Go back. Felt reinvigorated, healthy, and in fact never felt better. That's what he told her in the letter. He wrote that while he was at Cameron Pass. And then later that day, he left to go fishing and slowly made a hike north. Told some people that were camping around him. On September 2nd, he spent time with a friend fishing on the Colorado River. Told his friend that he was going to hike over Flat Top Mountain. That would be going from the area of Grand Lake on the far, far west side of the park. Hike over the Continental Divide and go down into Estes. And he told his friend that he was interested in going over Flat Top. He had done it several times before. It was no mystery to him. And he wanted to make it for the park dedication, which was that week. Imagine that. The week Rocky Mountain National Park gets dedicated. And Thornton wanted to be there. Now, September 3rd, he left Grand Lake. We stopped there for a second. Grand Lake, absolutely stunning lake. Sitting at the base of the Continental Divide. Clear water. Beautiful big fish. Gets a lot of activity. There's a small community there with, last time I was there about 4 or 5 years ago, and there's a little restaurant that had a gorgeous view of the lake. Served pretty good food. And you could sit there and just dream about where you're at and how gorgeous it is. Grand Lake, Colorado. So, September 30 left Grand Lake, taking the North Inlet Trail. And he was planning to hike over Flat Top Mountain, which was 12,324 feet. His friend said he took one meal with him. He dressed lightly. And the weather was good when he left. Let me say something about the weather. The weather in September in the Rocky Mountains is so unpredictable. I've been in Cameron Pass and had it be 95 degrees in September. I've been at Grand Lake in September and had it snowing a foot. That's how erratic it is. And in 1915, they didn't have weather reports. So Thornton didn't really know what he was walking into. That's why when you go hiking, it's so important to know the weather. Really important. So September 3rd, he leaves Grand Lake and he's heading east. Let me show you this. So this is Fern Lake right here. You're going to hear about this later. Fern Lake, Rocky Mountain National Park. He's going to go over the Continental Divide and he's going to drop down in what's called Odessa Gorge, which is right through this area. And he was headed for Bear Lake, right here. Estes Park is over in this area right here. And that's where he was, that was the eventual spot. But getting down through the gorge would be a safe place to be in a storm, but you don't want to be high up on the Continental Divide. Now Estes Park, let me tell you about that. One of my favorite little towns anywhere. It's kind of called the gateway to the Rocky Mountain National Park. It's essentially one long street that has a lot of cool shops, a lot of good places to eat. In that area, there's tons of hotels, motels, and I have been in downtown Estes Park with 20,000 people everywhere, and a herd of elk walks right down the middle of the street in Estes. I'm talking big elk, big racks. People are just mesmerized. Angie and I back up and give them distance. You don't want to get them mad. They are huge. Some of the big ones are huge. But it's a great spot. I encourage you to go. Don't go during the summer at the height of tourist season. I've always liked going to these places when it was off tourist time because I don't like being around tons of people, but it's worth it to go. So the first spot he's seen that Thornton's seen on the trail is 2 miles outside of Grand Lake. And he meets a guide named Carl Higbee who's also trying to get to Estes Park, and he rides up behind him on a horse. And they stop and they have a long talk. And Carl gives Thornton explicit directions on how to get down into Odessa Gorge after going over Flat Top. Thornton knew the way, had been there many times, but just wanted to make sure nothing's changed. And Higbee says, hey, when you get on to the east side of Flat Top, I'm going to put a stake in the ground and I'm going to tie my red bandana on it. And this is, you go right there and you go down into the gorge. Thornton says, great. How do they know this happened? They interviewed Higbee later and he explained what he did. Well, at 2 p.m., the last person on record that was able to say that they saw Thornton were 3 women that were heading west, and they kind of walked towards each other. And they said that Thornton was about 1,500 feet below the summit. That was at 2 o'clock. They conversed, wished each other a good day. Where are you going? What are you doing? Yeah, that's great. And Thornton took off. Now, 1,500 elevation gain, if you really humped it, you could get there by 4 o'clock. Well, all the articles in the paper stated that by 4 p.m., at the higher elevations, there was heavy wind, snow, huge temperature drop, and basically horrific conditions. Lower elevations, heavy wind, rain, warmer temperatures. And it was an electrical storm that moved into the area. Unbelievably, at 4 o'clock, Thornton would have been right near the summit on Flat Top, and he would have been dropping into Odessa Gorge. So this was on September 3rd. September 5th, he was supposed to meet Ella in Denver. He didn't make the meeting. She later told the press that she wasn't concerned because he had been on these outings many, many, many times in the past and came back late. He was all absorbed. But as the days passed, Ella got very concerned. 4 days after he didn't make it for the meeting, she started to talk to friends of his in Estes and at Grand Lake. And she put out a notice that she needed searchers to organize to start searching for her husband. Well, on September 13th, Ella had successfully organized 25 searchers to leave Estes Park and hike into the park and go west. And she had also organized for 25 searchers in Grand Lake to leave there and go east, looking for her husband. And the people had made contact with others who had seen him on that trail, so they knew what route to take. On September 18th, there were over 50 additional searchers besides the ones I just mentioned inside the park, covering it like a blanket. Now, what brought those searchers in? Ella had posted a $500 reward, dead or alive, for finding Thornton. Now, what happened was that she also put out a notice to her son, Frank, that their dad was missing, and he arrived into Denver on the 15th of September. On the 16th, he was in Estes, and he was with a man named Fred Moreau. And Fred was the chief forester for that district for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. For the Department of Agriculture. The Secretary of Agriculture told Fred to help Frank find his dad and do everything feasibly possible and stay on the search until they find him. Wow. That's a huge bill to fill. They stayed there for another week. On September 24th, the National Park Service and the U.S. Forest Service put out a press release that stated every trail in the park, anywhere near where Thornton had been hiking, had been searched multiple times, and they had found nothing. September 27th, there was an article every day during this time, and almost all of them said or had the word mysterious in it. It's a mysterious disappearance. Thornton was in great shape. Thornton should have hiked his way out, etc., etc. You know the line. Well, on October 2nd, maybe a week after the final press release, a rancher in Routt County, which is on the far west side of the park, is riding his property, and he comes across a body. It's horribly mutilated, and it's laying in the field with nothing. And they thought originally that the only person they knew in that area that could be missing was the Reverend. So the headlines all over the paper is that the Reverend's found 50 miles away from Grand Lake in Routt County, completely in the wrong direction. And this made huge news. And they played it up for a good 4 or 5 days. Like they knew it was Thornton. But not one article ever said, well, why is he way out there in some rancher's field? And then suddenly, without explanation, and I'm serious, no explanation, they said it was proven that it wasn't Thornton. And I read all of these articles for all these days 4 or 5 times, and I thought, Doesn't make any sense. So I searched forward in time, like I always do. And forward 17 years. Yes, 17 years. July 9th, 1932. A man from Fort Collins, Colorado, which is one of those cities furthest north before you get to Wyoming. A man named Meldrum Lukes is fishing in the Odessa Gorge, and he's next to a rocky overhang, and he walks up and he sees a skeleton. And he thought that the upper part of the skeleton was covered by some type of raincoat. And there was nothing else over the skeleton. And he saw that the left shin bone on the skeleton was broken. And he started looking around. And he finds some matches, a pipe, some fishing flies, coins, a watch, and then he finds the humdinger. He finds Thornton's diary. They found Thornton 17 years later. They never named the cause of death, but the theory that they came out with was he was coming down the Continental Divide, slipped and fell and broke his leg, and then fell down a cliff to where he was found. Except one huge problem. Huge problem. He was never near the top of the Continental Divide. He was near the bottom of Odessa Gorge. And he was under an overhang, per what Meldrum Lukes described. So how did he get there? Other big problem with this, huge problem. I have seen many bear inside Rocky Mountain National Park. And if I saw him now, I can only imagine how many bears and wolves and coyotes and mountain lions there were in 1915. And to find an intact skeleton after 17 years, where even the little rodents that come up and take bones and gnaw on them, I don't think I've ever heard of that. Ever. It's almost impossible. I actually called a couple friends about this, and they said, no, something's not right there. I go, yeah, no kidding. So between the bears, the mountain lions, the bobcats, rodents, it just... Well, let's talk about Thornton for a second. He was an intellect. He was a church leader. That area he was found in had been previously searched over the years, probably 20 times. He was found adjacent to a creek and a river at the bottom of Odessa Gorge. Water all around. Granite everywhere in that park. No cause of death. And weirdly, Thornton was the first person to ever disappear in the park. Let me say something about the search. I was highly impressed at what Ella did to find her husband and how many people she rallied, including the Secretary of Agriculture, to get them to look for her husband. Yeah, very bizarre. So, do I believe all the circumstances? No, I don't believe the people were lying. I just don't believe the circumstances could exist the way they were. Something was wrong. But Thornton Sampson was a true leader for his time. And to survive till 63 years old in 1915 with the amount of travel that man did, with the amount of illness and things that were in the world, diseases that you could catch. He was a survivor. I appreciate you being here, folks. I'm doing everything I can to keep this channel alive, keep you interested. I hope it's working. In the meantime, this is the kindness revolution. Causes nothing to be kind, costs us nothing at all. Be friendly to one another. Give everyone a second chance. And if you've got a family member out there you haven't talked to in a while, reach out to them. They probably want to hear from you. Really. Let me give you one last look at Huck. She kind of changed position here, but she is so out for the count. Poor girl. You guys take care. Paulides out.